Good day, everyone. Another great day here in Santa Barbara. So, this will be our last deep dive. I know people are probably very happy about this, which, dovetails with our happy theme. If I'm counting correctly, we've done 18 now. In theory, we should have done 20, and I would have liked to have responded to your reflections on both what you thought of working with the climate calculator as well as what you imagine the future to be like. But it just, would have been kind of unfair to have pushed that off until next week after instruction had really ended and all. So I've decided not to do that. But I will be doing a short little, by that I mean like 10-minute or so, little cap at the end, which will be entirely optional. You won't be tested on it. So, and I'll try to keep this one a little short too, which is kind of tough because the comments were just so wonderful this week. But yeah, the one thing I want to start with is that it was a wonderful way to start the film Happy with the rickshaw driver who has so little and yet is so happy. I think for all of us, it really made clear that happiness isn't about material possessions and all, which is great. But I do want to, to put that all in perspective, right? I mean, across the world with, low and moderate income countries, things have to change. Things have to get better. People shouldn't have to, live so differently across the planet with some with so much wealth and some with so little. Yes, it's true that wealth isn't about, having a lot, but that statistic that I keep saying, which you keep hearing, that, above a certain amount of money, like whatever it is, $75,000 a year of income in the U.S., well, you're not going to get a whole lot happier. But it is the case that people have a lot to deal with in life, and it's remarkable that they can be happy, like that rickshaw driver with that. So I just want to keep it in mind because it underscores that what this class has been about is, being fully aware of the social injustice issues, and we've been doing that ever since, even before the true cost. But also, it's an American-based class focusing on solutions for Americans at this time, and our solutions and our problems are very different than the rest of the world. And I just don't want to be inured to the problems that the rest of the world has, while we're doing this. So, okay, let's jump in, not to a comment at first, but to a quote by Jim Carrey. I think everyone should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that it's not the answer. Yeah, people keep telling us this. People like Jim Carrey. If you don't know him, he's a comedian of, I want to say, a generation ago. But yeah, it is the case that people keep saying it who actually get rich and famous and have those sort of dreams fulfilled. But it's something that we just don't take to heart. So I thought that was a fun way to start. But let's jump into the comments, which were really great this week, as every week. This person is responding to someone else, but the message is sort of self-supporting. I agree with you that the message of the film has good intentions. I would find it difficult to convince those who are in deep struggle or poverty that money won't give happiness. Security is an amazing feeling in the United States, and it's apparently not a right for everyone to be in a house or basic income. Yeah. I thought this was a good way to start, sort of going with what I just said. If people are deeply in poverty, as this person notes, people are in the United States, which is, pretty extraordinary given how wealthy we are and how much wealth there is, that there would be people who are homeless and who have basic, needs that are not being met, and food insecurity, amazingly, is an issue in this country. But anyhow, to tell folks, in situations like that, and that's why I started with the reference to the rickshaw driver, who starts the film Happy. I don't I think it's a different kind of message that has to be considered there, right? Because the message that we're talking about is for people who have wealth, and it is, what we've been talking about, sort of voluntary, simplicity or even minimalism. But it is a voluntary thing, a choice that people have. There are many people who don't have that choice, and unfortunately, our culture is designed as a consumer culture, it seems to me, to make sure that people support all these industries that want to be wealthy. And we've talked about big ones like the fossil fuel industry, beef industry, automobile industry, and so forth. So to do that, you have to barrage people daily, which we are now barraged, with, advertising to extra, to get that money away from us and into the hands of the corporations. Okay, well, that's how it works. But if you really don't, and if you have, a fair amount of money or a lot of money, it's all good. That system works. But those same messages are going out to people who are, really in poverty and don't have a lot. And unfortunately, that creates a real difficulty because, folks like that also are being, told that this is what it takes to be happy, and they are in no position at all to make even like small inroads into that by way of consumerism and purchasing. And I think that's a problem. It's a real problem because it sends the message that, the only way we're going to be happy is by buying things. And if you can buy things, and I think it's geared toward the average American, which, average American can buy things, some things, but there are a lot of people who just can't, and that presents us a deep, frustration, and it's a byproduct of the system. But I do think then what this person says, it would be difficult to convince those who are in deep struggle or poverty that money won't give happiness. When going back to the Jim Carrey quote, they've never even had any opportunity to try to do that. I mean, people who are relatively wealthy can at least try, but as a consequence, if people are in, as this person wonderfully expresses, a deep struggle or poverty, it just is a very frustrating position, and also never gives them an opportunity to test out the theory that money can't buy happiness. I mean, I think so many of the comments that people made in our class was the realization that it hadn't, because they had done things like online shopping and tried to do that. Well, there's some people who just can't do that at all. And I think this person is right, that unfortunately the message being sent out to them, this being broadcasted widely by way of media, makes for a very frustrating situation for them. I realize I'm not quite probably getting to what I want to exactly here with the idea of the rickshaw driver or folks in quote deep struggle here, but I do want to remember that this is the pursuit of happiness, and the way we're talking about is a privilege, and many people are not given that privilege. So, okay, let's jump to the next quote. What really resonated with me is the person in the film explained that happiness is a skill that you have to develop. I thought that was a really great quote that in a way summed up an important issue here, and that is, what we think happiness is something that often that we can buy. That would be the key to it. What exactly would that be? Whether it's, a car, a big house, whatever, that it is something that you can purchase. And that's the message that, is being sent by marketers, of course. But what if you think of it differently than that it doesn't have anything to do with buying it, that it's something else? Well, as the film noted, in part that's genetic, that we are in some ways, locked into how much happiness we can have because of our genes, which is interesting in its own right. But what if you look for another, not definition of happiness, but way into happiness? If you can't buy your way into it, then what else would it be? And this person rightly latched on to the fact that it is, quote, a skill that you have to develop. that's so radically different than thinking of it as something that you can purchase, that it's a skill that you have, and the modern word for that, was whether it's yoga or meditation or something, it's a practice. And a practice is something that you have to practice. You have to learn how to do it. You have to work at it, and you'll get better at it the more you do it. And it's odd to think of happiness that way because we've been conditioned to equate it to other things. But at the end of the day, it may well be just that, a practice, a skill that you have to develop. And unfortunately, most people, most Americans certainly aren't schooled in that skill. We don't. It's not part of what should be K through 12 education. I realize this course is kind of again and again said what K through 12 education should involve, whether it's things like learning about the climate crisis or developing the skill of being happy. But I honestly feel that's what's needed. And really, it probably stems from the fact that I'm an educator, that education is just really central here. Because if you think about it, companies marketing to us are educating us, right? They're teaching us things. From a very young age, they're teaching children. And I know this because my 5-year-old is barraged by it constantly. They're trying to teach you, that happiness comes from having stuff and all. We have to sort of counter teach something. And I think this is a wonderful way of putting it, that this is a skill that has to be developed. Okay, let's jump down. One of my favorite quotes from the film is, "With happiness, the more you have, the more everyone has." I think the statement is a stark contrast with our concept of money and material wealth. I also believe that the statement symbolizes humans' motivation for cooperation rather than the motivation for competition between one another. It's another wonderful comment here because what we're talking about is two ways of thinking about, how to comport oneself, behave with other human beings. Are you in competition? Well, in this sort of American dream model, competition seems to be built in. And in fact, consumer purchases and all, and sometimes are an affectation of it. You have the nicest car or nicest house to demonstrate that you're a very fierce competitor and you've done well. And, it shows everyone that you're, a winner. Well, it's a horrible attitude because then there are other people who are losers and the whole thing is framed that way. As this person rightly notes, there's another model, which is the model of cooperation, where you're not competing with other people, but helping other people. And people may, bristle at that, saying, well, I should take care of myself, but, not help other people. Well, that's all fine until you yourself need help, and when cooperation of others could help you as well. Like it or not, we are a social species. I know this is sort of American dream thing, kind of, or the idea of rugged American individualism kind of goes against that, that we are sort of independent, we take care of ourselves, we live in little houses by ourselves and all that. But we are, and what is repeatedly being said, partly in the film, some people have picked up on their comments in very interesting ways, but that, we have to remember that cooperation, does make us happy. Helping other people makes us happy. And that, if you look at the studies and all, that's built into what it is to be a social animal like us, because, if you think about it, if you were kind of like, hardwire, which in some ways we are genetically, how a cooperative social animal would work, you wouldn't want them to be entirely selfish. It would kind of undermine their need to cooperate. So instead, it would be hardwired that, cooperation is good and rewarding and makes you feel good, because that would make the system work better. The more cooperative people were with other people, the better. Now, again, especially in the United States with tribalism and all, I think there's a lot of bristling at that. But it does make total sense, and unfortunately at a time like COVID, it becomes very clear how when we need it most to cooperate and to help each other, that some people aren't. And I guess the go-to example is now and probably will be for decades when people look back on it, the idea of wearing a mask, right? Why do you wear a mask? It's not for yourself. It's for other people. It's to protect other people. You may be healthy and you may not be, in the group that's likely to get very, very ill from COVID, but there are people who will, and mostly elderly people with pre-existing conditions. Though it varies. But of course, if you're not wearing a mask, you may not be symptomatic and you may spread that to someone else who may in fact die. So the minimum that you could do is, you would think, wear a mask. You're doing that not for yourself, but you're doing it for someone else. It seems like a small thing to want to do. But I have to note that when I looked at the news this morning, I saw that there was a protest. And I won't say the stakes, I'm making it wrong. But anyhow, people were burning masks because they were showing their unhappiness with them. Yeah, I think back to the comment, I won't get off on COVID anymore. But the notion here is that cooperation rather than competition is something that we should really think about. Go down. I expected to feel hopeful and comforted while watching Happy. And at first I did, but I mostly felt disappointed. I knew a Western capitalist lifestyle wasn't treating me right, but that's a great comment. It's a realization we should all have, maybe, that capitalist lifestyle isn't just treating us right. But now a better lifestyle is staring me in the face, asking me why I've wasted so much time. I'm inspired by these people living simple lives in tight-lit communities, and I want to abandon my suburban home filled with stuff I don't need, surrounded by neighbors whose names I don't know, to give a little life with more, to go live a life with more meaning. But but if I do, what is the point of all the time that I've spent working? So many of my goals revolve around capitalist success, and coming to terms with the fact that maybe that shouldn't be the top priority means accepting that I've made a lot of sacrifices that I didn't need to. I know I'm young and there's ample time to change course, but I feel like the capitalist spirit of competition has taken years off my life. Just as a comment on that, it's a great comment, and why I put this one right after the other important insight that, that maybe we should think about cooperation rather than competition. But this person, I don't know how old they are, probably 20-ish or so, already feels that a good bit of their life has been taken up with competition and feeling that you really need it. You're on kind of a treadmill to do well, to win. And look, let's be honest, that's the way the system is geared. Even to getting into universities and all, you're all on a treadmill to which school you can get into, and it's a very competitive system. I mean, it's baked into the system, and this person already is feeling that I've spent a lot of my life already. And for me, I'm 61 years old. So looking at that, I have to kind of smile, because don't worry, you haven't wasted that much time. As a person who's lost years in different ways in my life, I wouldn't worry about it. But it is great to realize that, this system will take years off your life. It will take years of your life dedicated to that. Most people devote many years of their lives to that goal. And, if you've woken up to it at age 20 or so, that's amazing, because I think there are people who are, 40, 50, 60 and wake up to it and wonder what it was all about. And it's just, it is good to stop and think about it. This is the Thoreau thing, or the mindfulness thing, right? To stop and reflect and wonder if this is really what you want. Even, you've been, born and bred in this system to work this way, but it is your decision if you want to continue that way. Realistically, I know the answer is to gradually model my life after those that inspire me. This is doable, and that's comforting. I think it's really interesting that so much of a climate crisis class is centered on happiness, minimalism, mindfulness, community, etc., which seems entirely unrelated to the climate. I want to jump in there. Fair enough. I know that it isn't probably what you thought the class was going to be like, and in part it is because I come at this from a humanities perspective. If I were a scientist or a technology person, it would be a very different class. And I'm not saying it wouldn't be, equally valuable, but it certainly is the approach that we're using here. That we really need to think about what we as a species are trying to get out, trying to do in the world, and how it is impacting the world. But let me continue on. I think there's a lot to be said about about being connected with the world, and how harm to the planet is harm to ourselves. But I'll leave that to a more spiritual person than myself. I also think it's worth noting that a lot of the changes we've been advised to make for both the environment and our well-being bring us back to a way of life that our culture would consider primitive. We owe indigenous people in developing countries a massive apology for, among many, many other things, demonizing parts of their lifestyle that are exactly what's going to get us out of this deep hole that we've dug. We should be begging for their input on how to solve the climate crisis and the cultural problems we cause, because in a lot of important ways, they know a lot better than us. Yeah, get a drink of tea here. I thought that was a wonderful comment. The comment was wonderful. The two parts of it, 2 paragraphs, but let's focus on the second now. That, we have sold the idea of, the developing world, which when you think about it, which is why the phrase is sort of coming out of use, is because it suggests there's undeveloped, that in need of developing, and then the developed, and that should be the goal. Move in that direction. Now, look, there's something to that, right? And in the sense of developing, we mean by, a technologically developed infrastructure. And it certainly should be the case that people should have basic needs met, and technology can do it and all that, sure. But it's also a bad way of looking at it, because it suggests that, we have the answer and the other part of the world doesn't. And we've developed into the answer, and they need to develop too, and we need to reach out and help them. And as this person notes, and putting it in quotes here, they're primitive and they need to be helped. This person's comment is so good because it's turning that on its head and saying, well, wait, why do they need to develop into what we've become when this hasn't worked for us? Why do we think of them as primitive rather than not being the end game? So maybe it should be turned the other way around, that we should think of ourselves as the developing world to develop into what they have, which is not technological modernity necessarily, but, a better way of learning how to live. So many comments that people made, and hopefully I'll get some. They talked about, grandparents that lived in other places and how they lived a simpler life. And yet they, like some of the people we met in the Happy film, were actually happier people because of it. So we tend to look at like the Green New Deal, where AOC, I think, wonderfully makes a nod to the fact that we need indigenous knowledge. And I've talked about that in terms of learning how to farm by people who've been farming in an area for centuries. Yeah, that's true. But it's also, and I think this comment is squarely on the mark, that cultures that aren't, as westernized as we are, often have better, approaches to life that we want to disregard and see as just, quote, primitive, but they may in fact be better. So, sure, we're wealthier than a lot of the world. Okay. But maybe a lot of the world is happier than us. And it's, we who have to develop into what they are and not the other way around. I think it's a good comment, and not just because it reverses things, but because it's true. We can sit here and denigrate other cultures all the while and say that they should want what we have and we're the goal, and they, they'll develop into it. But it's a very flipped round way of thinking about it. If you stop to reflect to think about it, which is what this person did. But anyhow, let me jump ahead. because I don't want to spend the whole time today. One of the things I wanted to do after watching this film was to go meditate or go do some exercise outside. I have never been into meditating, mostly due to the fact that I was skeptical that it would actually be happier. However, the older I get, and the more my friends and family tell me how great meditation can be, and that it can make them feel happier. Not only this, but I definitely noticed that that on a week when I have more time with less schoolwork, I'm much happier doing those things because I have time to skateboard outside, which allows me to do something that I love to do and helps me release dopamine while also practicing and concentrating on getting better at something that I love. It allows me to forget about the future, my day-to-day stress, stresses, and helps me focus on the present. Making music has also allowed me to stop worrying so much and allows me to get outside my thoughts. I truly wish that American society would focus more on the importance of happiness for its citizens than money. The Nordic model of government system that Bernie was advocating for sounds like a great start in centering the American life more on happiness. We can see in the 5 happiest countries that universal health care, free education, more paid vacation, less hours to work per week, all contribute, allowed for more happiness while also making society more efficient because the citizens are more happy to work when they have to. America could learn a lot from these countries. Great comment. So many people have been commenting on meditation, and I told you that, when Peter Kalmus put that in his book and subsequently the film, he was skeptical because he thought that people would sort of have raised eyebrows. And yet that's something that people have been very interested in, according to him. And certainly in our class, and certainly in the honors section last time, when we were talking about this film, among other things, it kept coming back to meditation, and it became like the end of the honors section. So I do think that people are trying to figure out, and I don't mean our class, although that's true, but I mean, I think in the world today, what sort of things actually can make us happy. And I think that meditation is something that has become, I don't think it's a fad. I mean, I really think it is it is sort of settling into the culture now as a way of trying to figure out how to be happier. But as this person rightly notes, there are other things, and this idea of like going out and doing something like skateboarding and just getting into it and forget about anything else. I actually shared with the honors section a story I'll tell you. It's from a book it's actually a psychologist who studied meditation, trying to understand how it worked and all. And he was at a retreat, and he was trying to meditate, and he just couldn't, release. He couldn't stop thinking about all his problems and things and all. And he wasn't really getting into the spirit of it. But at the retreat, he was in a room where he was staying with 2 other people. There were actually twins who were there to learn meditation too. But they were avid jugglers, and they were juggling, and he got intrigued by it, and he asked them if they'd show him how to juggle, and they did. And he got working at it, and eventually, when he started doing it, he realized that his mind was totally in what, the film Happy is called flow, that he wasn't thinking about anything else, that he was just in the moment of doing that. And he realized that's what he was there to learn all along, that yes, formal meditation is a way to do that, but there are other things that can do it too. And many people have commented on things like skateboarding. There's another comment, if we get to it, on surfing, about, that gets you in that mindset. Yeah. The other thing that this person commented here on is what many people commented on. And this is specifically in terms of Bernie Sanders, who's advocating for, democracy that is more equitable and sharing, so-called democratic socialism, and something like Denmark as an example, where we're actually getting into, with one of the stories we'll get to today about the single mom in co-housing, to see how this Nordic model actually works. But, again and again, people have said that, it just seems like we should be considering other options like this, And as this person, rightly concludes at the end, America could learn a lot from these countries. I think it's absolutely right. I mean, we have this idea that we have the best system and the best model, but, there are other countries that have been experimenting with lots of things for quite a while. So, Personally, a silver lining to the pandemic is that it's made me prioritize what makes me happy in my life and filter out things that don't make me happy. Ultimately, it's the little things for me. At home, it was things like taking my dogs for walks, cooking with family, talking with friends, watching great Netflix content. Up in Isla Vista, the things that make me happy include going on walks along the beach, finding a great study spot, making new friends, trying new restaurants. Whenever I think about happiness, two professional fields come to my mind: education and community-based nonprofits. I have been fortunate to have attended schools where teachers are truly happy because they are doing work that they love and they're changing lives. And when I've worked with several community-based nonprofits where employees also are truly happy because they are doing work that they love and they're changing lives. I think the core reason behind their happiness is that they don't do it for money, they do it because they love it. Yeah, great comment here. Number of great points. First, it does seem to be, and this is borne out by studies of happiness and all. It's little things that you do that, like, just breaking free of your routine to take the dog for a walk or cook with family or something that, that really does make a difference. But the other thing is, if you're, thinking about like a career and things like that, doing things that ultimately help others. And again, this goes to this notion about us being, at root a cooperative rather than a competitive species, that when you cooperate and help others, and this was, the example in the documentary Happy, the guy who was, as I mentioned him a few times already, a financial person, very successful in London, and then went to Calcutta to work with people who were basically dying in the hospital where he was, and yet ultimately was happier. That doesn't quite make sense to the way that we're taught about happiness. But I think this person's right. I mean, you don't have to do dramatic things like that, but even something like being a teacher or working for, a community-based nonprofit, these sort of activities can make you happier. It seems the case. And if you don't believe it, and if you don't believe the studies and all, I think if you're considering professions and what to embark on, it would be good to talk to different people about, things, because I think or what this person did, which I think is a wonderful idea, is, if you volunteer yourself with like a community-based nonprofit that's helping the community and all, then just to get a feel for what that's like. I mean, think of it as a little experiment that you can do. It won't take a lot of time out of your life. It's a helpful thing to do in the world. But just to get an experience of what a world like that is like, I think you might find that, these are all things that you don't make a lot of money. So, educators are famously not paid well. I think I'm probably paid more than I should be, honestly, so I won't buy into that. But I think for a lot of educators, it's the case. K through 12 teachers and all don't make a lot, should make a lot more compared to other things they can be in. But they do it in part because it feels like the right thing to do. It's a way of, giving back and being involved in community in a very positive way. Or it's a way of being cooperative and helpful rather than competitive. But anyhow, I thought that was a great comment and something to, in a bigger sense, to think about the kind of the life you want to live. And this is what's so great about the comment. Because it started off in the little things like taking a dog for a walk, cooking with family, great. But then you can also think bigger things. You can think of, what you would actually want to do as a profession and all, how you would want to live. I think it's useful to pause to think about that rather than just, trying to get the most successful job you can or whatever. So whatever it's worth. As we are in the middle of both a climate and a mental health crisis, our leaders aren't more focused on the correlation pointed out by Ken in the film Happy. The American ideals, such as big homes, cars, and lots of stuff, are carbon-fueled desires. I think I want that phrase. Carbon-fueled desires is a wonderful phrase to think about, because all these things require carbon. So things mentioned here, flying and all, they're all carbon-fueled desires. So it's interesting to think about desires or things that aren't carbon-fueled. We should do that more often. Anyhow, great phrase. It is absurd to me that in a country where you're not concerned more about how people whose lives aren't aimed toward the carbon lifestyles are living much happier lives than us. A man like Bernie Sanders who simply tries to point out that the kind of democracy in Scandinavia that people in Scandinavia people do provide things like healthcare and education to their people. It's often called radical or laughed at by conservatives in America. I feel almost as though we've been brainwashed. Despite being presented with the fact that big homes, nice cars, and surplus of stuff do not correlate with happiness, consumerism is still shoved down our throats on the daily, and we eat it up. As a generation, I feel like we must take initiative and start acknowledging that these ideals are causing most of us to live tireless, unfulfilling lives. If we don't, a small portion of people will continue to hoard wealth while over half of the country will suffer and work to survive, while all the while we destroy our planet. Its life in the process. Yeah. If you think about it, right, and this person really puts a sharp edge on it, it seems pretty clear if you look at this, the study of happiness and all, that all this isn't working. And, it raises the question, well, why is it continually, as this person noted, shoved down our throats? Well, it is working. Consumerism is working incredibly well. Who's it working well for? It's the corporations that are selling the stuff. They're the ones that are constantly creating this American dream. I mean, they're holding it out there as a dream. And in every case, their products are a way to get to it. And they're deprecating our lives in the process, right? I think I mentioned before, you may have seen an older documentary from, it seems pretty dated now, I think it's from '07 or so, The Story of Stuff with Annie Lennox. And she wonderfully sums up what the whole project is about, and that is that, these corporations are intent on telling you that your life is shit. This is her phrase. And that the only way to get out of it is whatever it is they have on offer, whether it's the car they have or the clothing or whatever. These are things that are going to make you feel better. That works for them. It's been incredibly successful for those corporations, and they've aggregated themselves. So the last I heard, 85% of all beef in the U.S. is coming from 4 corporations. So you might think, well, beef is like little farmers out there and all, and they're not really, in this business. But yeah, 4 corporations it comes down to. There aren't that many fossil fuel in the sense of, oil companies and all. It's just a very few companies that have been doing this for decades and gotten better and better and better at it. And it works for them, but it's not working for us. And I think, it's good to stand back and think about the project, because if it's supposed to help us and isn't, but is helping them, I think it's time to, reflect on that a little. Okay. While watching the film Happy, I was reminded of a positive psychology seminar I've been taking for the last 2 quarters. I found it so interesting and incredibly inspiring that psychologists want to study happiness instead of studying the things that go wrong in our psyches. Comment on that. That's new. That what I mean by that, and we saw in the documentary, 3 decades ago, definitely, people weren't. I mean, depression was well studied, and people were trying to understand it more and more. But why we didn't think about studying happiness too? And it's people like Martin Seligman at the University of Pennsylvania who really started it. And this is going back 30 years ago, but especially like 20 years ago. And this is a good comment, because if you're not familiar, as this person is, because this person is taking 2 classes on it at UCSB, it is a thing now. It is a real part of psychology and sociology to be studying happiness. Governments study it now. We have quotients of which are the happiest countries and all. So it is something that is long overdue for study. So it's great to hear that there are whole classes, double classes at UCSB on it. Both the seminar and this film helped to reaffirm my gratitude, my gratefulness for what I have in the present moment. They also give me time to reflect on all the privileges and wonderful memories I had while I was growing up. Yes, I did not have much because my family is poorer than others, but I am almost positive that I had more laughter in my life than most people I know. I pride myself on enjoying the little things and telling people I love them with every ounce of genuineness I can muster. I haven't always been able to count my blessings or smile and laugh from deep in my gut, because for the longest time I did not think I deserved life, let alone happiness. I'm so utterly grateful I can enjoy my life with the ones I love and look to a bright future, even with all the atrocities that are happening around the world and me. Life is a perfect gift, and there is no one out there who can change my mind about that. Yeah, I thought, there were so many like this heartfelt, just wonderful comments on how people personally felt about happiness and the things that we're talking about here. And this is a wonderful one. And look, this person notes that they didn't grow up with a lot of money, and yet they would bet that they were actually happier. So it is interesting, for all the people that trying to get everything and all. If we actually listen to people who don't have those things, they're often very happy. And if they're not happy, unfortunately, and it goes to what I was saying at the beginning, it's because, we're told, everyone, on a day-to-day basis, that you're not happy, that, to quote Annie Lennox from The Story of Stuff, that your life is shit and that you need these things to get happy. And, that's one of the sad things, because, and it goes back to the other person and the comment on, quote, primitive people that, are told that they need to develop and become what we are. Maybe it is the other way around. We need to develop and become what they are, that they are the ones who actually have it figured out and haven't bought into this project, which, promises happiness for everyone, that you can buy it, but doesn't deliver, and only, in essence, makes the corporations happier and allows them to profit by it all in a literal sense. Yeah. Care about something bigger than yourself to cultivate happiness is the quote that stuck with me from the film Happy. Happiness has been proven to be more about feelings of compassion, gratitude, and acceptance rather than successes checked off on a checklist. By the way, this person's phrases here, compassion, gratitude, acceptance, these are actually things that people have looked a great deal about, like compassion. And in Buddhism, the phrase is metta, which means loving kindness toward others, toward yourself, self-compassion. People are spending a lot of time looking at the impact of this, that compassion is something that we really kind of lack in our culture today, especially with the tribalism of America, who caring just about ourselves and not about other people, even other Americans. It's very disturbing, but when we actually look at it, and again, this is because we're a communal, species, it's not surprising that compassion would be kind of, baked into us, that we should care about others, and we find it most gratifying when we do care about others. Anyhow, let me go back to this, that compassion, gratitude, and acceptance rather than success is checked off on a checklist. People who are happy are not striving just for their own happiness, but for the betterment and happiness of those around them. Sorry, I'm popping back on again. But that is a great statement. And there's another one that if we get to, but I'm not sure we're going to, because I don't want to go super long today, that, think of happiness as yet another thing, and you'll get stressed out. That if suddenly, am I doing enough, gratitude? Am I getting enough, giving enough compassion and all? That's the wrong way to look at it. And in fact, people have become concerned about this, because now that we're waking up to the idea that, happiness is something that we should all want, just the same way people were anxious that they weren't getting all the stuff that they want, and now people are getting anxious that they're not as happy as they should be, or they need to work harder at happiness. Or to go back to the earlier quote, which is so great, that, happiness is a skill that we need to work at. Yeah, but you don't have to be the world's best person at happiness. You don't have to be like an Olympic level happiness person. Although, if you remember, we met one, the Buddhist monk in Happy, when he was put in the MRI, we found that his brain is, in fact, the happiest. Yeah, I don't think that's what it's about at all. I don't think that, that you should get stressed out about whether you're not happy. Happiness is something you just have to kind of, relax into rather than strive for. And, this person rightly notes that, just doing things to make other people better and all is going to help with that. But yeah, let's try not to think of happiness as yet another achievement for Americans to make. Just as the man in the film quit his banking career to volunteer and help those in need of more than the following the pursuit of money and material things. I think this message has been said within my life quite a bit, but I feel like it speaks to me more than ever as I decide what kind of career path I want to start settling down on. I could choose a profession that guaranteed a great income, or I can set aside material things and look for what I am truly compassionate about, and also see how I can strive to make the world a better place. And that sounds so cheesy, but it's true, as the world is so focused on material wants and gains rather than how a certain job or action makes a person feel. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful point, and I think that's pretty much the takeaway from Peter Kalmus as well, because Peter Kalmus decided, a ways back, when probably a little older than you are, that he wanted to go in a different direction with his life. And again, he's such a good example, because I think that guy could have had it all. But, and by that all, I mean, the American dream. But instead, he wanted something else. He wanted it all too, but the things that really mattered, and he pursued them, and seemingly has gone a long way toward getting them. And that's why I suggested, during the last deep dive, that's kind of a new American dream to think about as a way of supplanting the old one. And it's not coincidental that, I think he's a climate scientist, because he's caring about that too. But his message, which I think becomes clear, and is why I put his readings with this documentary Happy this week, was that primarily he's doing this because he wants a better life. He wants this new American dream. He wants to be happy. He wants to be more fulfilled. He wants to feel like he's helping other people. He wants to have time to live life and to be with his family. Secondary, the way he puts it, is that it's going to help the planet. I mean, that's just icing on the cake. But it's such an interesting way to think about it, because, again, everything that we're talking about here is for a lot of people, they would think, well, this is just silly. That's not, none of that is silly. I mean, all that is silly. I mean, if you want happiness, you have to get all these things. But of course, it's all indications are that that's not going to give you happiness. So after watching Happy, it's brought the central topic of the course to another level. I think that's it. That's a great way to put it. Before I have watched the film, I have heard a lot about the studies on happiness from my major. I'm not sure what this person's major is, but if it's like psychology, that would definitely be the case. As presented at the beginning, psychologists have been trying to seek the factors that influence happiness, and they have found that to live a happy life, one needs to have basic needs met, then friends and family, and have time to do activities one enjoys. The opposite side, psychologists claim that material goods can't make a person happier than those who don't have them. Rather, these people will be more stressed and depressed since they need to work hard for their desires. This information further supports the things we've discussed in earlier weeks, that we don't need a lot of clothes, lots of cars, big houses. And if we don't want these things, we can protect our climate at the same time. Yeah, so the way this person has put it is great. It's often referred to as a hedonic treadmill, that you will want to get these things because you're told to get them, and you'll get stressed that you don't have them, and you'll spend a lot of time working to get them and all. And that that just creates stress. It presents a sort of goal-oriented thing that you have to have these things, and that creates stress, and then trying to get them. It's a very good point, and I mean, and this is again psychologists talking about how that works, that presents a major problem for our psyches. It makes us stressed and less happy. But anyhow, this is a longer comment here. One person that I remembered the most was the lady in Denmark who was divorced with 3 girls. According to her, she was depressed because she had no goals in life and couldn't stand the pressure on her shoulders. However, she found this co-housing community where 20 different families live together to share meals, spend time together. This kind of co-housing concept has been so popular in Denmark as a way to reduce environmental pollution and connect people together. Every family is only responsible for 2 meals, so cooking 2 meals a month, and they have time to do what they want to do each day and be able to communicate with each other to increase their satisfactory level for life. As the lady in the film, she was able to find a place where she is cared for by her neighbors, and her kids were loved by other kids and adults in the same community. It helped to get them over the depressed past and face a better future. So, as one can see, the co-housing solution for climate change seems hard and comfortable at first, but I can see better increases the satisfaction in life and make people happier overall, yet at the same time protect the climate. There's a further part of this comment that I want to go to. Yeah, it's great that Ken has been talking about climate projects important not only in the earth but also for ourselves. Maybe people will have doubts toward climate change and the solutions, but it's clear to me that these solutions can impact how good we live and how happiness, even when people don't apply these solutions for climate protection. Yeah, I have to say that as the person noted here, the lady with three girls who moved into the co-housing facility. That's one of my favorite parts of the documentary. I've seen the documentary a lot now because I watch it, every time I assign it, and I thought that was a fascinating thing that we just don't think about in the United States. Co-housing. Someone else, maybe I think it's the next comment. Hopefully, I'll get to it. Noted that you kind of have a taste of that in if you go to a university where you're living with people and all, but then we break away from that. And if you think about it, it has an awful lot to offer. It's just something that we don't even consider because it's not part of regular American culture, something like co-housing. And again, I noted in one of the very early lectures back when I was talking about climate and generation that, often people in my generation, I've said this before, repeated this, but I'll say it again. If you tell them that, the kind of future that we should want is one without cars and without beef and without big houses, but rather, to live in co-housing with other people, they would think that this sounds like the worst possible thing, that this is in fact what is held out as like, what the future will hold. This is like, like Soviet Russia or something. Well, but if you actually look at it, and the interesting thing is, this is not just theory, right? This has been enacted in other parts of the world. So if you want to wonder, well, co-housing, that's an interesting idea. I wonder how that could possibly work. Well, let's go look. And if you want to investigate more about it, if you go online, you'll find more and more. And you'll find, in fact, communities in the United States going this way. And hey, maybe one of the things that you'll do with your life is promote co-housing and work to develop it. And people have and people are. But it is interesting to think about other options and other possibilities and look at how they have been implemented and all. And again, why do this? Like the Peter Kalmus thing. Well, okay, yes, it helps the climate, but that's the icing on the cake. There's something more substantial in the middle, and that is how it impacts you. Even though it may be counterintuitive, to the way we're told in America, because we think it's all about getting things for ourselves. So let me jump to the next part. Next quote, rather. The part of the documentary stood out for me the most. Yes, this was a quote, the one I wanted. It was co-housing opportunities in Denmark. It's such a counterculture lifestyle when considered in a rather greedy American context that I found it to be a very attractive idea. It made sense in every way that I could think of. It's more practical. It gives you more time since chores and cooking are shared responsibility. It provides community to watch over your children. and extra helping hands. It also appears to be more fun. It sort of combines the best part of college, where you can be living in close proximity to so many friends while still having your own space, with the best part of adulthood, growing a community with friends and raising a family. I found myself wishing I grew up in Denmark, where there is additionally free healthcare, public education. Yeah, no student loans in Denmark. People in Denmark might not have their own room or a giant house or their own car, but they seem to be happier as Americans, and most likely even happier. The studies would prove they're a lot happier, by the way. There's a lot to be learned from Denmark, and I believe that they can, that if they can live fulfilling and more sustainable lives, so can we. Yeah, great comment. And I thought the number of interesting things here, but the one in particular, thinking about this in terms of, how people live when they're at college, and, you live with other people. Now, look, it's not all rosy, and, we've all had bad roommates and all. It could be a problem. But it's interesting to think about that. We could look at Denmark and say, well, there's another model, or the Nordic model. And there are a number of countries that this, Denmark is just the one that I've been using because it's a good exemplar, but there are others. But we actually have something in the United States kind of like this, which is the, experience you have at university, where you're all living in co-housing. You're all in, like in a dorm in one big building. And if you're not living in a dorm, you still may have like roommates, and a number of people share a house. It's co-housing. You all eat together. You're not cooking the food necessarily, but you're all eating together, sharing meals, being with other people, and it's a very social experience. That's been sort of baked into the university experience in the U.S. and elsewhere. And other people have commented on the fact that, and this has been my experience as well, that if you ask people, older people, what their best time of life was, the experience they enjoyed most, it often goes back to their years in college. And that's kind of a striking thing, because it's also a pretty demanding time. I mean, you're working pretty hard. It's not like it's just all fun. I mean, you have to work hard, or you won't do well. And yet, in spite of all that, people are very happy. We can attribute it to youth culture, because you're young or something. Okay, I guess, or you're first time you're out of the house with your parents, I guess. And apologies, because during COVID, I know that's not happening, but soon life should be getting back to something like normal. But it might also have to do with the fact that, it's a very social time, where people are meeting a ton of new people, encountering people on a day-to-day level, living with people, and enjoying it and all. And it's just interesting to think about that we're told that, we should abandon all that, and, we're sort of pushed out into the world to go be by ourselves and all. And it's, again, as a communal, social species, it's not surprising that people have such good experiences when they live together, and not surprising either, I guess, that they're not as happy when we're not as happy when we're not together. Something to think about. Next comment. Before watching the film, I actually reflected on why I felt depressed over the last couple of weeks. Everything was fine. I had enough to sleep and rest, and it seemed like nothing went wrong. Then I sat in front of my diary for an hour and kept trying to find out what's the one missing ingredient of happiness. Then I found the answer, and it was mentioned in the documentary: the flow when you're doing something that you're passionate about and social interactions. Now that I've been doing remote learning with the time difference for over 5 months, I realize no matter how hard I try to live a normal, healthy life, it's always different from high school, where my friends and I, are around all day, and we can just run downstairs and throw frisbees on the front lawn. I play ultimate frisbee during high school, and we had training twice a week. Those training frisbee throwing practices, interactions with my friends and teammates, were what I missed the most. After coming up with the answers, I made a list of things that would make me feel happy and tried to lower the boundary of happiness. It seems like happiness is harder and harder to attain nowadays, especially during the global epidemic, but I think as long as people focus more on their intrinsic goals, personal growth, relationships, desire to help others, we can all be happier. This was one of many, many comments, very heartfelt comments where people were actually, and again, might sound odd in a class on the climate crisis, taking stock of their lives and what makes them happy, and realizing that something like COVID has made clear to a lot of people that, we're disconnected from other people. I mean, yeah, we can text and things, but if you think about it, this would be, a real problem for a social species that, social connections were broken. I think, though, if you think about Henry David Thoreau, what he was trying to do was to disrupt his lifestyle to try to realize what was important. Well, no one wanted COVID, that's for sure, but the fact that it disrupted our lives should have helped us see what was important the same way as it did for Thoreau. And this person, and many people rightly noted, suddenly it became clear that interacting with other people, being around other people, in the case of being at school and living with other people, that was like one of the biggest things that was lost. And as this person rightly took stock to why they weren't, why they were depressed and not feeling well, that came into focus right away. And also going out and doing things with other people, playing, frisbee and all. I mean, just, things that, if you think about it in terms of like the sort of the capitalistic American dream, yeah, there's nothing gained by playing frisbee, right? That doesn't, I mean, I guess maybe some people could, play ultimate frisbee and try to network with other people in order to be more successful. But I think the idea of tossing a frisbee around or a ball or something is just not, a very goal-oriented thing towards, achieving the American dream. And the whole notion of play is now, pushed aside too. We don't, we play like video games and all, but the notion of people just sitting and playing and having fun, which reminds me of an earlier comment that I didn't pick up on at the time. I was kind of moving here quickly, but the person noticed that making music made them happy. It's that in itself should, you could write volumes about that, I guess, right? How music has now become yet another consumer thing, right? Music is something that everyone could do, that everyone used to do, that people used to sing. People would sing, when working together. People would, get around and play music. I've always enjoyed, so where I live here, you can walk over to, there's a park, not too far. It's downtown. It's Alice Keck Park, if you've ever been there. But I think it was on Wednesday afternoon, like late afternoon, a group of people would, it's like my daughter and I called it the spiral, where we used to take her when I was pushing her around in a stroller when she was young. But a group of people would get there after work and play bluegrass, and they would bring instruments, and these are, things like dulcimers and all. Not, and they were good, but I don't think anyone was there was like a professional musician, but they just got together to play music, and it was absolutely positively delightful. My daughter was like 2 or 3, and I'd push her in the stroller. She would just sit there transfixed, listening to people making music. We've kind of lost that because music is yet again something that people figured out how to profit by. And I'm not saying that there aren't great musicians. I am stunned by, Lady Gaga's voice. It's absolutely amazing. And I think Billie Eilish and Phineas are brilliant in what they can do. And I think, there are people who are great, and we can enjoy what the great potential of what music can be and what we can do as a species. But it doesn't mean that we all just can't sing or have fun with music. And I guess so much of this is kind of forgetting those things. So, okay. So I am definitely trying to cut this short, so I won't go longer now. We'll leave that comment there, and we'll leave the course here, I suppose. Insofar as, I think at the end of the day, what we need to can do is to consider what would make us happy, what would make everyone on the planet happy, and how that will affect the planet. The good news is that the things that are a problem, it's pretty clear, aren't making anyone happy, and they're not doing anything good for the planet. So it's a win-win, or certainly it suggests a course of action, which is to reconsider life and to reconsider, the life that America has been selling. And as the person noted in a previous comment, the lives of people that we call, quote, primitive, that they may in fact have the answer and seemingly do have a lot of answers that we don't. All in all, I think it's just a reassessment of culture that's required now, and it's an exciting thing, right? Because it means that human, life could get better. That to address the thing with the climate crisis is not meaning that life is going to get worse because of it. That's the big fear, and that's why people don't want to act on it necessarily, because they think it's going to quote Donald Trump's tweet, it's going to take away our burgers and our cars and planes and all. And people say, well, it's going to take, but everything suggested, like in this documentary and what we've been considering, is that this will actually give us more than we've had. Okay, I won't go too long. I'll sum up the class in a kind of a more formal way for 10 minutes or so in my final talk. But I think this is a good place to end for now. Okay, so take care.